A lot of you have asked me what it takes to make 700 horsepower to the wheels. And my answer to that is basically how to make up to 1,000. Welcome back to another episode of Mod Stars. I'm your host Z. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And this is a special episode of the Mopar Wars. That is me addressing the Mopar on Mopar hate I've seen over the last 2 years, and I never understood it. For those who are new, welcome. For those who are not, welcome back. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share for those who haven't done that. And the Mopar Wars is me addressing this hate where at the top of the ladder, people think if it's not a Hellcat or a Trackhawk, then the car is garbage. And at the bottom of the ladder, people think if it's not at least a Hemi, aka the Pentastar V6, then those are garbage. And this couldn't be any further from the truth. In fact, my top video on the channel and from the Mopar War series is the V6. Second to that is a 5.7 Hemi. And third to that is a WK1 SRT Jeep, which runs a 6.1 liter Hemi. And really, they all can compete with each other at different levels, depending on how far you want to go. You don't want to like to hear that. You may not accept that, but it's the truth, and I've done a decent job expressing the knowledge of that. Now, this takes it a step further because I don't know if you guys all know each other or plan to do this, but literally just last month, honestly, within the same week almost, I've gotten a few comments saying, hey, how do I make 700 horsepower to the wheels? Actually, the day that I started making this video, a few more people asked me, I want to make at least 700. And I'm just like, okay. So again, I don't know if you guys know each other and plan this, but I really appreciate it because it inspired me to not only make this episode, but to keep the series going a little longer. So thank you all for that. And I want to address a few things really quick. Two things. It's just a philosophy of mine in life. One, ownership, period, of just life. That's a conversation for another video if you guys want to have it. Two, more so relates to this video, this channel, and car culture, period. Building. Nobody builds anything anymore. I mean, nowadays you can put fender flares on a car and it's a wide body kit. You know, a lot of people who believe their car is X fast, makes X amount of power, all they have is bolt-ons, tune, and a little bit of flex fuel, not even full 85, like anywhere from E10 to E30. And they run a tire and they think their cars are fast, and not as fast as they might think, especially on track, because they don't go to the track. But the thing about it is, if you're going to have a goal, and if you're going to make X amount of effort, I'd like to think you want to make that goal as consistent as possible and last as long as you possibly can, which is why I have a strong emphasis on building. Now, otherwise, if something goes wrong, if they lose a race or the car acts up, they literally have built-in excuses. So if you don't want that and you want to increase, your rate of success, have a plan, stick to it, be just disciplined enough to do so, your due diligence behind it, even if it takes a little longer to do, you'll have more consistent results, maybe even better results. So with all that being said, this video is a way to help you all with that for those who are interested. Depending on your budget and your goals and methods of getting there, majority of the parts that you'll need are probably in this video. So watch this video as many times as you can. If you have questions, ask me. If you need part lists, I got you. I'll give it to you. Just ask. So let's get started with the fuel system. So if you have a factory fuel pump, you can run a booster pump or a JMS fuel pump booster. And this will increase the voltage of the fuel pump to run the pressure on demand that you'll need for the power that you're using, if that makes sense. There are people who have CTSVs, ZL1s, even Whipple Coyote Mustangs that run booster pumps that make like 600 horsepower, or even a little bit more than that. And apparently, early model Koenigseggs have run booster pumps or equivalent, just to put in perspective. Now, for those who want and or need to have a proper fuel pump, MMX has a single drop-in fuel pump that's rated for 750 horsepower to the wheels, and it is E85 compatible. Now, for those who have a 2020 to 2023 Chrysler 300, there is a dual pump fuel system that's drop-in, rated for 1100 horsepower to the wheels. That is also E85 compatible by MMX. And for anybody who has earlier model, 5.7 Hemi vehicles, Ford Innovations has a dual pump fuel system as well, rated for 1,200 horsepower. Now, moving on to fuel injectors. Fuel Injector Clinic has 1,000cc injectors, and depending on your injector duty cycle, and whether you're running supercharger or turbocharger, you'll be able to at least make 900 horsepower more or less. And they're plug and play and 85 compatible. And if you want to make a little bit more power, they have larger injectors as well. Now, for anybody who's running a Whipple supercharger setup, make sure you get the 38mm injectors so they fit properly. Now, moving on to internals, building the bottom end of the engine, forging the block. Now, on the last 5.7 video, I mentioned, water methanol injection and flex fuel on stock block. Now, we're not doing that. We're talking about stroker motor kits. So anywhere from 360 cubic inch to 396 cubic inches. Fun fact, not only are they pretty much drop-in, no balance required, but 345 cubic inches is not 5.7 liters. Not even close. It's technically 5.6. Like, we've all been led to believe that it's a 5.7, but this may even explain the power difference in 5.6 versus 5.7 Chevys. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It doesn't matter. And it's kind of irrelevant to a certain point, and I'll get to that in a little bit too. But just a fun fact there, even if you round it, it's still 5.6. Now, the reason why I mentioned that is because the smallest stroker kit you can get is a 360, and there is a slight oversized bore option to where it can become a true 5.7. Other than that, you do have a 392, which y'all know is 6.4 liters, and then a 396 cubic inch, which is 6.5. Now, from my understanding, these are rated for 1,200 horsepower as well, regardless of the size. And depending on which stroker kit you choose, I think would really vary whether you want to run supercharger or turbos. And I'll talk about that a little later in the video, but those are your options there. That being said, let's talk about superchargers really quick. Now, if you're running like a Whipple, for example, and you want to run more boost. So the rule of thumb for these is that you either run a smaller upper pulley, which is a supercharger pulley, or a larger lower pulley, which is a crank pulley, or a combination of the two. Now, for example, you could run the 18% ATI damper and you can increase boost. Or because the standard Whipple supercharger pulleys on a 6-rib kit is about 3.5 inches, then you can drop it down to a 3.4 and some change, or a 3.2. And I say that because the rule of thumb is every 1/8 of an inch is equivalent to 1 PSI of boost. So if you go from 3.5 to a little less than 3.4, that's about 1 pound of boost increase. And if it's a 3.2, then we're talking 2, maybe even 3 pounds of boost increase as well. Now, depending on how much boost you want to run, of course, you're going to need larger injectors, the fuel setup, we've already addressed that, but you're also going to need to tune the car as well. And for majority of these supercharger kits, they're either going to be tuned by Diablo Sport or HP tuners, and that's one of the options you have to choose. So you're set there. Now for the ProCharger and Vortex supercharger setups, I know for the ProCharger 6-rib kits, their pulley size is about 3 inches, and I think the Vortex one's a little smaller than that, and it seems like their other pulley options are larger. So maybe for those centrifugal superchargers, the rule of thumb is the larger supercharger pulley, the more boost you can run. And of course, make sure you have the car retuned and the fuel system is all there. We already addressed all that. Moving on to turbo kits. I'm sure none of you expect me to say those words and having to do with Hemis. Now, specifically the Hellion Sleeper Twin Turbo Kit. This thing has the capability of running anywhere from 5 pounds of boost to 35 pounds of boost, and that's more than you'll ever need. And the reason why it's called a sleeper, well, here's what the kit looks like when you pop the hood. You can't see anything. Now, here's the other picture, and just go ahead and pause the video and see if you can find out where the turbos are. So you're not really going to know until you either drive the car and you own it, or you find out the hard way by racing it. And what's cool about this kit is that in addition to getting a larger intercooler as an option, the 4.5 inch race intercooler, you could also get a booster pump to further prove the point. Now, I'll leave the link in the description below of some Chrysler 300s. I tend to do this to support my claims, is give you guys information. Wrecking shop on Hellcats, legit. twin turbo Chrysler 300s, they don't say whether or not they're Hellion twin turbo kit cars. It doesn't matter because these things are just sedans, almost full-size sedans, depending on who you ask. And they're just cruising by Hellcats with ease. So, again, this is an option for a lot of you out there that you didn't know even existed. And it may even be worth it. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later on. But moving on to, the top end of the motor, you can, to get the CNC heads, the ported, the angled valve jobs and things of that nature. And then your drop-in cams, of course, you need a catch can and a 180-degree thermostat. And moving on to more fundamental things like I've talked about in previous videos, the differential. You have your 309s or 390s that you can upgrade to. Unless you want to keep, your factory final drive, that's fine too. But definitely get a diff brace. If you're going to run this much power, I imagine you're going to be racing quite a bit. And just try not to blow up the differential, so get a diff brace. I mean, even stock Hellcats have been susceptible to this. So, yeah, diff brace for sure. Other than that, 4-inch aluminum drive shaft and drive shaft shop. And again, get a drive shaft safety loop for the same reason as you get the differential brace. In addition to the drive shaft, they also have axle upgrades that are rated for 1,400 horsepower. Now, for any manual transmission cars, yes, they do exist. There's quite a few out there. I recommend the RXT 1200 clutch, and it's rated for 1,200 horsepower. It's kind of in the name. Now, for anybody with the earlier automatic transmission cars, the NAG1 or NAG1 transmissions, FTI has torque converters that are rated for 750 wheel horsepower up to 1,000 horsepower. In addition to that, MMX has transmission builds, full transmission builds. Their stage 2 is rated for 1,000 square, being 1,000 horsepower and 1,000 pound-feet of torque to the crank. And their stage 3 is rated for 1,350 horsepower and 1,350 pound-feet of torque to the crank. Now, for anybody with a newer Hemi vehicle, like the HP70 transmissions, you can get the HP8 180-degree thermostat for your transmission. But there's also a transmission build option as well through MMX, and it does include the Mopar 1320 torque converter. In addition to that, the ATI SF5 flex plate. And going back to the NAG1 transmissions, if you guys need a transmission cooler, Durrell has an option. Now we're going to stop here because we're going to talk about brake options. Now, Bear Pro has 14-inch and I believe even 15-inch 6-piston caliper brakes. And the max wheel size for these are 18-inch wheels, so definitely keep that in mind. Brembo, of course, has their GTS, whether it's slotted or drilled rotors, and same principle there. And then BMR has their 15-inch big brake kit that includes their spindles and rear suspension kit because these are catered to drag racing. So again, for those who are going to do a lot of drag racing, a lot of track time, be it no preps, eighth mile, quarter mile, is something you might want to consider. And in addition to BMR's 1.25-inch drop springs, they also have their Demon Killer drag springs, again, catered for the drag racers. And they have a ton of suspension parts, from the front and rear strut bars to sway bars. They even have fixed and adjustable arm links, like adjustable and fixed end links, control arms, tow rods, and trailing arms. And that's pretty much it, ladies and gentlemen. We've covered pretty much everything except for tires on this approach. I mean, that will depend on, again, your power goals and what you want to use the vehicle for. I imagine it's going to be drag racing for a majority of you of some type. And you probably have an idea of what tire you're going to run, be it a slick, a radial, or whatever tire you're going to need to run in that class or on the road, whatever. That's it. We've covered everything. So let me know what you guys think. If you have any questions, ask me. If you want parts lists, ask for them. If you have questions, I'll answer your questions and offer parts list. I'll give it to you, whatever. Stay tuned because I'm going to make a video like this, but about the 6.1 Hemis. And like, subscribe, and share. Really thank you all for inspiring me to make this. And if you don't know, now you know, but do what you want to do.